Hey everyone, how are you all? Today we will see what if Naruto learns Ninshu. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. The scratching sound of lead meeting paper was the only sound that broke the silence of a small room. The room, while relatively bare, showed that a child lived there. A basket in the corner overflowing with dirty clothes. The single bed in the corner of the room next to the open window was unmade, and a few papers were left lying around on the floor. The owner of this room sat at a desk on the other side of the window with a small book left open on the desk. The owner was a small boy dressed only in a white muscle shirt and a pair of baby blue boxers. The light streaming in through the window reflected off of the owner's odd white, yellow spiked hair. His hair being odd because of two particular spikes that stood out among the rest. These two spikes stuck up at odd angles reminiscent of horns, both of which were bone white in contrast to his golden yellow hair. Currently the child's azure eyes were roaming over the book on the desk with hardly restrained joy, while his right hand clenched a pencil tighter as his wrist rotated and moved this way and that, dragging the sharpened end of the pencil across the paper. It wasn't until a knock came from the door in the other side of the room that he finally tore his gaze away from the book. "Naruto, time to get up. Breakfast is ready, so unless you want Kana-chan to eat it all you should come down soon." The moment the word, breakfast, was uttered, the boy, Naruto, was already on the move. Racing across the room, he threw open a folding door that separated his closet from his bedroom and grabbed a black shirt and a pair of black shorts. Not even waiting before he was finished dressing himself, he was out the door, hopping on one foot to put on his shorts. He had just gotten his shorts on when a blur ran past him and accidentally hit his shoulder, causing him to lose his balance and fall flat on his face. Glaring up at the cause of his misfortune, he saw a familiar face looking down at him with childish amusement mixed with genuine regret. She was a young girl dressed in a full red silken pajama top and bottom. Her hair a shade of blonde like his own. The only difference was that golden blonde was the only color present in her hair. No bone white bangs, that fell to her shoulders in a Heim bob cut. "Hee, sorry Naruto," she sang before turning back and rushing down the stairs at the end of the hall. He only had time to blink before she was gone. But the moment his brain shook of the surprise, he stumbled back to his feet while attempting to run after his fleeing assailant. Unfortunately, by the time he had gotten down the stairs, she was sitting at a small mahogany table with a large bowl of white rice with several small bowls filled with different colored liquids and a medium-sized plate with a variety of diced meats. Looking at the sight, Naruto could do little more than sigh in annoyance. "Do you really have to do that this morning of all mornings? It's our birthday, couldn't we eat something normal for once?" He flinched when his mother, a beautiful crimson-haired woman dressed in a silken white nightgown and a green apron, turned a stern gaze at him from around the corner of the door leading to the dining room. "Naruto, don't be like that. Everyone enjoys their birthdays a different way. You didn't hear her complaining when you ditched us last year to spend the evening at Hiruzen's grave." He grimaced at her accusation. Okay, he deserved that, he would admit. But the entire village treats him and his sister as heroes, yet they completely forget that it was ultimately Hiruzen who had given up his life to seal the Kyuubi into his sister and himself. He just wanted to pay the old man the respect he deserved for his sacrifice. He turned away with a guilty frown on his face. Seeing this, his mother's face melted into a soft sigh. "I'm not angry with you, Naruto. Just try being a bit more understanding. Just because you like starting the day one way doesn't mean Kana-chan has to like it too. If we all liked the same thing, we wouldn't be human. Do you understand, Naruto-kun?" Feeling a bit better, Naruto gave a small glance at his mother before looking at the girl now seated across from himself. "Sorry Kana-chan," he mumbled out. Across from him, his sister gave a giant smile, showing her pearly white teeth before hiding it behind a contemplative look while glancing down at the bowl of rice in front of her with a spark of mischief. She smiled happily again with a nod. Apology accepted. Naruto smiled happy at his forgiving twin. That was before she continued. "If you sample my next attempt at Kana-chan's super hot dragonfire rice." Naruto paled at her request. It was normal for Kana, his sister, to be given a bunch of different ingredients for rice. What wasn't normal was how bad at cooking she actually was. Every time she tried to make a dish, it turned out one of three ways: insanely spicy, absolutely disgusting, or, on not so uncommon moments, a mix of both. What made it worse was poor Naruto was always her test dummy for when she tried out new combinations. The only upside to his sister's cursed cooking is the fact that when she fails at making it edible she tries again, and again until she actually makes it taste good with the same effect. But it takes her so long to find the perfect blend that she can't be considered a prodigy. Just really, really determined. With a horrified gulp he glanced at his mother who had turned her own shade of white while looking at Naruto with her own glance of pity. Then she smiled weakly at him before disappearing back around the corner to leave her son to his fate. Almost crying out in betrayal he turned back to his twin before, hesitantly, nodding in acceptance. Almost squealing in joy Kana grabbed a small saucer with a small pile of red powder before taking a pinch and adding it to the rice. Then grabbing another after putting the earlier one down she poured the entire saucer of slow-moving syrupy, brown, liquid on top of the rice. Glancing at the other offered ingredients she grabbed 2 pinches of a brown powder and added that, followed by the contents of 2 more saucers being emptied into the bowl. Then with a large spoon she stirred it all together until the rice was colored a light shade of pink. What really made Naruto worry was the odd crackle he could hear coming from the strangely colored dish. He didn't even have time to blink before he found the bowl in front of him with his sister holding a pair of chopsticks with a clod of the pink rice held in between them. Taking a whiff of the rice he actually felt his eyes water, his nose hairs burn, and the back of his throat itch with his spit glands work overtime to moisten his mouth and throat for the coming assault. With obvious reluctance he glanced into his sister's hopeful eyes pleadingly, only to nearly flinch when he saw his sister's eyes sparkling with happiness. Half-heartedly he smiled at her. Kami above, he just couldn't deny her when she looked at him like that. It was the single most cutest thing in existence. With his jaw trembling he slowly opened up with his tongue quivering. In the slowest motion possible he inched his mouth closer to the clump of rice with his eyes watering the closer he got. When the chopsticks were finally in place his lips quickly closed and he pulled away from his sister who had been leaning across the table the entire time. The entire room had gone silent, waiting for the blonde's reaction to his sister's creation. Even their mother had peeked back into the room to make sure she didn't have to take Naruto to the hospital to get his stomach pumped. Yes, her cooking was so bad at times it mimicked food poisoning. Naruto sat as still as a board with his eyes clenched shut. Each bite he took he waited for the inevitable. The entire room waited. Then Naruto opened his eyes weakly, and offered a half-hearted smile at his sister. Then his face reddened. Their mother watching from the kitchen as Naruto's face slowly, shade after shade, of red tinted his face. It finally got so red that her own hair looked hot pink in comparison. Then all attention in the room went into Naruto's silent pain-filled scream. Yes, a silent scream of pain, only coming out as a pain-filled wheeze as he clawed at his own throat with sweat starting to drip down his face. At first it was just a few drops, but those few drops quickly escalated into rivers which only grew in size when his tears added to the mix. If it wasn't obvious enough he was in pain, then his hoarse coughing and choking definitely made it obvious. Oh God, why? Why did his sister have to be born as cute as a kitten? Why was he so easily influenced by those eyes? It hurts, he screamed mentally. Because physically it wasn't possible to scream. Every time he tried his throat would spasm in agony. Every breath would feed the fire currently raging in his throat. He could feel the burn all the way in his stomach. Another hoarse whine made his already light-headed feeling increase. Pain was all that he knew for those horrifyingly painful minutes, sitting there choking on air while that cursed food wreaked havoc on his throat and stomach. Those minutes passed ever so slowly, in which every moment felt like his very soul was being burned to ash. When it finally started to die down, Naruto was left inhaling entire cupfuls of water, trying to extinguish that hellish burn. Finally he was left gasping for breath while he was gazing at his sister's dish with nothing short of traumatized freight. Looking at the bowl, no words could possibly describe his experience. Then he looked at his twin with a look that sent an actual chill up her spine. Even being only 6 years old, the look he gave could have made the Kyuubi no Kitsune cower in abstract terror. Only 2 words left his mouth, 2 words that forever ended his days as her food tester. Never again. Feeling the certainty in his tone, she shakily nodded with a sheepish smile. Ehehe. I guess you really shouldn't add Marluxia powder to dishes, sorry Oni. Hearing her genuine apology, Naruto lost that look on his face and replaced it with an almost too pleasant smile. It's okay Imouto, Just make sure you don't ask me to test any more of your food until you actually master the dish. I don't think I can handle anything like that anymore. Kana nodded at her brother's request before put her ingredients aside just as a squeal was heard from the kitchen. Both kids winced when a loud snap echoed through the room. Both had to struggle very hard to not outright laugh at what, or who, walked out of the kitchen. A tall blonde the same shade as Naruto and Kana walked into the room dressed in a pair of black sweatpants and a white t-shirt. His eyes were the same shade of azure as Naruto's own. But what made the two kids restrain themselves was the large goose egg growing out of his spiky golden hair. Following behind him was their mother, glowing almost as red as Naruto a few minutes prior, holding the broken handle of a wood spoon. Their mother was glaring bloody daggers at the back of the older blonde's head. Feeling the glare of the fiery redhead, the eldest blonde chuckled with a sheepish smile, rubbing the bump that had grown on his head. "Come on, Kushina-chan, I was just playing around, no harm done." He pulled out a chair on the right of Naruto and the left of Kana and took his seat. "Oh really, Minabaka? Try explaining that to Kana and Naruto when they hear how you made me spill their birthday breakfast, HMPH." She ended with an indignant huff while her cherry blush grew a shade brighter. All attention went to the eldest blonde when the twins heard about their food. "To-san," the two scolded, but Naruto's face quickly grew a sinister smirk when he caught sight of the remains of his sister's failed attempt at making rice. Looking to his twin, he caught her gaze and sent her a message through his gaze by glancing at the rice. While she blinked confused for a second, she looked at the place her brother glanced at and she grew her own vicious smirk. "Oh to-san tilde," she sang much too sweetly. Hearing the tone his daughter called to him with made him freeze. "Yes, Kana-chan," he asked wearily. It was fairly well known that while Naruto was a genius prankster, his sister was who helped him by giving him her own specially created materials to make his pranks even more deadly. So everyone who knows her tries desperately to keep on her good side in hopes she hadn't picked up a few of her brother's pranking habits. Kana gave her biggest innocent smile that was almost impossible to fake. Then her eyes seemed to glisten with happiness while she brought her hands into a finger lock in front of her chest as if to beg. "Could you please try Kana-chan's rice she made?" Kana-chan made it special just for To-san. Her glistening eyes seemed to get wider as Minato gazed into them, absolutely frozen. "Don't worry, Kana-chan. To-san will eat every last bit of rice for his sweet, innocent Masumi." While this was currently being thought, Kushina was having her own struggles with restraining herself from glomping Kana and telling her how cute she was. Naruto himself was snickering aloud at the man's predicament. If he wants to cause their breakfast to be ruined, then he had to be punished. Besides, if Kana wanted something, then she knew how to get it. Mix there To-san's natural obsession with cute things, which he had admittedly inherited, with Kana's ability to act as adorable and cuddly as a kitten, and you get Minato the fourth Hokage wrapped around a little girl's finger. Minato looked at his daughter with a fatherly smile, if a bit restrained, and gave his response. "Of course, Masumi. I'd love to try your cooking. I'm sure you're just as good as Ka-chan by now." Not hesitating the least bit, Minato split apart a pair of chopsticks and gave the traditional response of "Itadakimasu," and dove in with the energy of a child. Mother and son watched this with smirks while Kana kept her innocent smile until Minato had emptied the entire bowl. Not once showing an inch of what Naruto did. But watching her husband eat had made something click in the back of her mind. "Oh." Leaping to her feet, Kushina rushed back into the kitchen for but a moment before coming back out with 2 small bowls. She walked around the table and set one bowl in front of Naruto and Kana each before setting herself back down. "Sorry about that, Naru-chan, Kan-chan. I got a bit distracted by your father." Here she threw another glare towards the still eating Minato. But the glare melted off her face when she saw his cheeks take on a tint of red. Kana was the first to respond to their mother. "It's all right, Ka-chan." Naruto merely nodded in agreement, not looking away from the now very red Minato, who had just finished his bowl of rice. The devilish grin that grew from Naruto's lips was mirrored by the entire table. Except Minato, for obvious reasons. They all watched as Minato's smile slid from his face into open-mouthed horror. His eyes losing their light while the muscles in his face twitched sporadically. Finally, in a flash of gold light, he was gone, but the scream of pain echoed through the room at his absence. All was quiet for but a moment after their father's anguished scream finally subsided before the entire room burst into hysterical laughter. Naruto crying, he was laughing so hard while holding his stomach. Kushina was failing epically at hiding her own laughter, with her own tears making trails down her face. Kana though was the most vocal with her amusement. She had already dropped to the floor laughing because she lost her balance on the table. Unfortunately, she had hit her elbow in the fall but was so cracked up on laughter she could only lay on the floor holding her hurt elbow while crying tear of pain and humor. An odd mix to be sure, but if one were to look at the family health record, stuff like that was fairly common in the house. Minato walked back into the room as dignified as a male who screamed like a girl being groped could be. He stood there for a second gazing at the scene, his wife trying desperately to hide her own amusement, again, failing epically. His son, handsome boy that he was, and the man he would become, laughing his heart out. Kana, his beautiful daughter, only to grow more beautiful as the days pass, not hindered at all by her tears. Laughing pitifully on the floor, not quite sure if she should cry in pain or in good fun. He truly felt his heart warm at the thought. This is a family, my family. A stray tear ran down his cheek watching their laughter die down. Kana trying to catch her breath while stumbling back up into her chair with the help of her brother. He smiled at his son helping his sister. Seeing his sister sit back down in her seat, Naruto finally managed to calm his own mirth. He saw his father's look and felt confused and a bit worried when he saw his father's tear. Dad, are you okay?" Minato looked to his son and saw the worried gaze that replaced his mirth and smiled. "Yes, Sochi, I'm alright. I'm just happy to have you all with me today." A bit confused at the response, Naruto shrugged off and stored it in his mental cabinet labeled, grown-up stuff, and moved on. To-san? Hearing his son's nervous call, Minato raised a blonde brow from curiosity. "Yes, Naruto." Naruto looked down, finding the reflection of himself in the bowl interesting. "I was just wondering, if maybe because we're turning 6 today, if maybe, we could possibly, sorta get tea training." When Naruto had started stuttering, he had gotten worried. Naruto was a confident boy by nature. Smart, happy, and brave to boot. But when he heard the question, he couldn't help but flinch. When he looked to Kushina for a bit of help, he saw Kana focused entirely on him from the corner of his eye. Kushina herself was in the same condition. The way she bit her lip nervously and averted her eyes to the left, a nervous habit she adopted in childhood, showed she didn't know how to help him on this, so left him to fend for himself. Gulping at feeling the eyes of his daughter drilling into the side of his face, he cleared his throat and met Naruto's gaze. He decided to go with the best course of action, complete honesty. "I haven't really thought about it, Sochi. Me and Ka-chan have been a bit busy, so we haven't had time to discuss it. If you and your sister give us till the end of today to talk about it, we'll have an answer for you in time for your party." Seeing his son's face clench into a thoughtful frown, he mentally prayed the boy relented. He audibly sighed when Naruto nodded in acceptance. "Okay, to-san." Smiling, Minato sat at the table with his family and watched as the two kids dug headlong into their meal. When his gaze caught his wife's, he had to withhold a flinch. She was glaring at him with a look he recognized all too well. "Sai, today is gonna be a long day." Accepting the inevitable scolding, he went back to his thoughts on how to handle the situation. "Smarter and smarter every day, huh, Naruto? Too smart for your own good at times. But I guess he wouldn't be my son if he wasn't. Hey, I'll call for Jiraiya with the toads and see what he thinks. He always did give the best advice when it didn't concern women." Feeling another, more heated, glare burrowing into his head, he matched Kushina's knowing, "I forbid it," gaze with a look of his own. They held their silent conversation for what felt like minutes until Kushina finally relented with a sigh of defeat. Once more looking at his family, he could feel something. From his time training with Jiraiya, he had a distinct knack for feeling when something is about to go wrong. While it was small right now, he knew that as time went on it would only get worse. Again he looked at Kushina, who was unknowingly having the same thoughts as her husband. They held each other's gaze for but a moment before looking away. But the message was received. Something about today was bound to go terribly, terribly wrong. Coughing into his hand, Minato looked to the small clock hanging from the wall next to the kitchen door. Seeing the time, he looked to his family with the charming smile he was known for. "So Sochi Masumi, since today is your day, how about we go on a walk around the village? I had gotten a few requests from the civilian clan heads to bring you by their shops so they could give you 2 early birthday presents. Then we'll go to Akamichik for lunch. Then hustle back home, then get ready for your party tonight. That sound like a plan? Naruto frowned a bit and looked to Minato, displaying his confusion. What about Ichiraku's? I thought we'd go there like we do every year. His disappointment was evident. The love of ramen seemed to be a trait that all Uzumaki shared thus far. Minato chuckled at the pouting children. Well, normally we would, but the head of the Akamichi family personally invited us to his restaurant for your birthday with the best food the Akamichi can make. So how about it? Normally the two would have refused immediately. But Minato knew how to use wordplay to get people to do what he wanted them to. The Akamichi, while owning the best restaurants on the entire continent, don't often serve the best of their many more traditional recipes. Handed down through the Akamichi clan from generation to generation, each generation finding some way to make the meal more enjoyable than the last generation. A lot of hearsay suggests that in order for a boy to become an official member of the Akamichi clan, they're given a recipe for a traditional Akamichi dish and told to make it better. While sounding difficult, the Akamichi manage to do it almost every new generation. Meaning that to taste a traditional dish of the Akamichi clan is the highest honor the clan can give. And the clan head had offered 2 plates of said dish to Naruto and Kana. To turn down such an offer would be like spitting in the face of a daimyo. Insulting, disrespectful, and the same as calling an Akamichi fat to their face. An utter death sentence, which means that his son and daughter had to be told. Seeing the hesitant look on their face, Kushina sighed from her place at the table. If you won't tell them, then I will, Minato. We have to accept Choza-san's invitation. The Akamichi are a very warm and welcoming clan with few ways to ever get them angry. To call them fat is one way, and to refuse an invitation to a traditional Akamichi meal which is forbidden from being served to people outside the clan unless it was voted for through the Akamichi clan traditional council would be the second. An unspoken rule in Konoha followed by everyone is to never get them angry. By refusing to go, it could insult them. You two should know this. I've been teaching you 2 clan politics for the past 2 months, and the Akamichi clan was the very first topic we brought up. Looking to her daughter, she saw a blank look on her face before it grew a bit red in embarrassment. Hee, sorry Ka-chan, I don't think I was paying attention. Hearing her excuse, Kushina's brow twitched in irritation followed by a malicious aura of death. Glancing at her son still with her angry aura, she saw a disappointed look on his face. Sorry Ka-chan, I remember the lesson but forgot to use it. Seeing her son's honest eyes, her expression softened marginally. It's alright Sochi, you're still a kid, so you're allowed a few mistakes to learn from. Turning back to Kana, her expression hardened when she saw the relieved look on her face. Don't think that applies to you, Kana. Your brother actually paid attention to the lesson and knew what I was trying to teach. He just doesn't have the experience to use it. You on the other hand ignored the lesson and don't know the material. Starting tomorrow you'll be starting makeup lessons with me. But Ka-chan, don't you, but Ka-chan, me. You are the daughter of a clan head. While I don't really like politics either, we have to know it because if we don't, then insulting someone could be the least of our worries. Do you understand me, Kana? Now properly scolded, the young blonde sunk lower in her seat with her head down. Yes Ka-chan. Kushina was back to all smiles. Good, then I think it's time for us to go get ready to go. I'll clean up the dishes while you 3 go on ahead and get dressed. Minato, who had silently been watching his wife's verbal assault, wasted no time in getting up to leave. Trying desperately to hide the shiver of fear that had gripped him seeing Kushina begin to lose her temper. Naruto and Kana both got up to leave. But Kana's walk was a bit more stiff. Naruto, seeing the upset expression on his sister's face, felt a pang of sadness for her. No one liked to be told they were in the wrong. Naruto himself has been on the wrong side of Kushina's ire a few times himself, and it really was an experience he could do without. Feeling the urge to comfort his twin the moment the two had turned the corner at the top of the steps, he stopped and pulled his sister into a comforting hug. His sister just stood there with her eyes watering and now sniffling. It took a moment before she started to return the hug shakily. Feeling her shaking slow to a stop, he pulled back and smiled at his twin. Feeling better now, Imouto? Wiping her tears with the back of her wrists, Kana returned her brother's smile with a warm smile of her own. Yeah, thank you Oni-san. Naruto's smile widened an inch seeing her smile. You're welcome Imouto. It's an older brother's job to care of his imouto. Kachin just wants you to be prepared for the possibility that I can't take over the clan when San feels I'm ready. Just try to get less distracted and you'll blow through everything Kachin has to teach. Even if you don't, I'll do everything I can to help you until you do, I promise. Kana's smile seemed to brighten up the dimly lit hallway from how bright it was. Thanks Oni-san. With her thanks given, she broke off from her brother and ran to her room to get dressed, leaving her brother to his own thoughts. In the dimly lit hallway one could see Naruto's smile aimed at his sister's back. Seeing her turn into her own room at the end of the hall, he entered his own room to change into more presentable clothes. Break. Slap. What the hell were you thinking, Minato Namikaze? You know I don't want my babies to be ninja, and what do? You turn around and tell them, with me in the room no less, we would talk about it. Kushina's fists were balled into fists as she glared into her husband's eyes. Rubbing the red hand mark on his left cheek, he gazed down into Kushina's eyes with a stern gaze. You knew we would have to do this, Kushina. I don't like it any more than you do. But the two of them are Jinchuriki, like it or not they have to learn to use the Kyuubi's chakra. If not, then it wouldn't just put the village at risk, it would put us and them at risk. Have you ever heard of a Jinchuriki that wasn't made into a shinobi? He didn't even give her time to respond before he continued. No, you haven't, and for good reason. A Jinchuriki can only hold a Biju because most sealing takes place when the host is young and their chakra coils are underdeveloped and more malleable. The older a civilian gets, the more difficult it is to use chakra. If we let them go without training, then the risk of Kyuubi's chakra poisoning them grows higher. Seeing Kushina look away from him, Minato calmed down a bit. His voice softer, he took Kushina's hand in two of his own to comfort her. That isn't even mentioning the political shit storm the council will throw up. If we don't train them to use the Kyuubi's power, there is a chance the council would go to the daimyo and take the decision out of our hands. If that were to happen, then I would have to choose between either my family or Konoha. Please Kushina, don't make me choose. Kushina stood there shaking, two visible streams of tears dripping down her cheeks. Her bangs shadowing her eyes, engulfing them in shadows. Her fists clenched so hard her nails dug into the palms of her hands, drawing blood. The two stood in silence. Minato with his eyes closed, holding his wife's hand to his forehead, enduring the death grip she had set hand in. Kushina, engulfed in a sea of emotions, pain, anger, frustration, sadness, were just the tip of the iceberg. Finally, after a while, Kushina fell to the floor on her knees in defeat. On one condition, Minato opened his eyes to look at Kushina. His gaze weary. Only one of them is trained. I want at least one of them to live a peaceful civilian life. That is my only condition. Her tone was defeated and slightly cold. A complete contrast to her normally outgoing personality. Minato's smile could have ripped his face in two, it was so big. He dropped down in front of his wife and hugged her with everything that had. All of the pent-up emotion this conversation had created being released from his tense body. Thank you, Kushi-chan. I can work with this, one of them will work just fine. But there is still the question, which one? Break. Namikaze compound main room, 30 minutes later. Kushina and Minato stood hand in front of the double doors leading outside of the Namikaze main home. Kushina dressed in a long white blouse that ended mid-thigh and tight black pants that ended mid-calf. Her left bang pinned behind her ear by a green hair clip. The only evidence of their earlier conversation being Kushina's slightly red eyes from crying and the slightly tanner skin on Minato's face shaped like a handprint. Minato himself dressed in his everyday Hokage outfit. A dark blue bodysuit with white bandages wrapped around his waist holding up kunai and shuriken holsters on either hip, and a long white trench coat with red flames starting at the tail and ending just below his lower back, right below the emblazoned kanji for Yondaime, imprinted and covering the entire upper and mid-back. Both stood glancing up the stairs from time to time, waiting for their children to come down for their family stroll through the village. If one focused enough on the feeling of the room, they could tell that the atmosphere was rather tense. Especially around the couple in front of the door. It was well hidden, but small gestures like small glares being sent towards Minato were enough to tell that Kushina wasn't happy with him. Not at all. But the moment the kids came stomping down the steps, the tense atmosphere vanished, being replaced by the warm smiles being sent towards the two kids running towards them with Naruto pulling Kana behind him. The two stood in front of their parents panting, now dressed in new clothes. Naruto wearing a pair of black baggy shorts and a white yukata closed at the chest and tied by a gray sash. Kana, now standing beside her brother, now gazed at her parents with thinly veiled excitement. "We're ready, Kasen, Tucson, can we go now? I want my presents." And the real reason she was so excited makes itself known. There is no kid that was raised properly that could resist being given presents. Taking a moment, Kushina studied her daughter and found she quite liked her chosen clothes. Kana had her hair tied in a pair of ponytails tied at the side of her head with 2 cherry red ribbons. She wore a white spaghetti-strapped dress with a black obi tied around her waist to form a bow. Nodding her head with a smile, Kushina gazed at both with motherly love. Short Tatabane, looking up at Minato, "So Mina-kun, where to first?" Stepping outside, the family of 4 all set out towards the gate. Minato on the right holding Kana's hand while she held Naruto's, who held Kushina's. "Well, I was thinking we stop by Kala-san's tailor first." She said she wanted to give them a few new clothes to add to their wardrobe for the party tonight. "Then we go to Maro-san's jewelry. He said he recently came upon some things he thought would look nice on them. Next would be a few stops along the way at a few vendors that wanted to give a few of their products away as free samples. Then we stop at Akamichik for lunch. Then we circle back visiting the shinobi clans on our way home to prepare for the part after we stop at Tenzin's shinobi ice for a sweet treat." How does that sound? Naruto and Kana were too focused on walking to really pay attention, but Kushina nodded in place of the 2 twins. "That sounds alright. Although, what could Maro-san have found that he thinks would interest a kid? Jewelry isn't really their thing." Minato shrugged while absently waving to the passing villagers that greeted him. "I wouldn't know, but he was pretty excited about it, so I decided to humor him. Hopefully it really is something interesting." With that, Kushina looked to her son with a loving smile. "What is Sochi-kun and Masumi hoping to get today?" Naruto looked up at Kushina with a smile showing his age. "I want to get some more pencils and a new art book. My old one is almost out of clean sheets and all of my pencils are all used up except for one." Speaking of which, he replaced the hold his mother and sister had on his hands and pulled out a small leather-bound book with a pencil sticking out of one of the pages. Opening it, he took one last glance at his family before focusing on the pages of the book with pencil in hand. Kushina, noticing her eldest getting absorbed into his little book, rolled her eyes with a giggle. It was fairly common for Naruto to occasionally zone out in the middle of walking somewhere. In fact, there was almost no place where Naruto would be seen without his book. He had always shown an interest in the art of sketching. Such an interest, in fact, that on his 4th birthday the very book Naruto was now focused on was his most treasured gift. It really felt nice knowing that if Naruto didn't become a shinobi, he could always fall back on being an artist. If you asked Kushina, she would say B was a prodigy in the art. Even if she wasn't an artsy person by nature, the proof is in Naruto's book. He had already been very good at drawing small things like shapes when he first got the book, and he only got better and more curious as time went on. Until the art-loving Naruto everyone knew today was born. Looking to her daughter next, she motioned for her to start. Well, Kasen, I was thinking about starting a garden so I could grow my own ingredients. I also wanted that make-it-yourself ceiling kit I saw when Tu-san took me with him to Ten-chan's dad's shop. Seeing her mother throw a glare at her father, she suddenly felt a little bad. Did I say something wrong, Kasen? A bit alarmed, Kushina frantically shook her head. No, Kana-chan, you didn't say anything wrong. It's just that your Tu-san shouldn't have let you wander off in a place like that, honey. So many sharp and deadly things could have fallen on you. I would never forgive myself if you were hurt, Masumi. Feeling her mother's worry, Kana smiled to relieve her of it. Don't worry, Ka-chan, I didn't leave Tu-san. I just saw it on the counter while Tu-san was talking to Ten-chan's Tu-san. Looking back to Kana, she was about to say something when she noticed something was missing in her family. Looking with a bit more focus, she glanced at the empty spot between herself and Kana when it hit her like a brick in the face. A smiling face with 3 whisker marks on each cheek flashed through her mind's eye. Minato, where's Naruto? Break. With Naruto. Naruto ignored everything around him, his gaze planted firmly in his book. He closed an eye to try to find a better angle for his newest drawing before he crashed into someone and caused him to stumble backwards. He would have fallen if it weren't for a hand being placed firmly on his shoulder to steady him. Looking up at the man, he couldn't see his face because the man was dressed as a priest with the hood of his white robe up shadowing his face. Sorry sir, I wasn't looking where I was going. The odd monk chuckled, his voice was strangely smooth yet aged and powerful when he spoke. It is all right, young one. But keep in mind, keep your eyes open. If you do, you may see something not many are privileged to. With his words said, the aged monk turned and began walking. Strangely enough, it seemed that all sound outside of the two of them had been muted. The strange crescent moon staff of the monk had 3 rings that would rattle harmoniously every time the bottom hit the ground. Dark times are coming, young one. The drums of war beat soundly on the horizon. You, I feel, will be the one to unify harmony and peace. The words rang through his heart and resonated with his very soul. As young as he was, it didn't take an adult to know that there was a hidden meaning in his words. When he spoke again, he was being blocked out by the growing crowd with the sound returning. 2 become 1. Remember this phrase, young Jinchuriki. Only the one who stands above the darkness yet shuns the light is worthy of opening the path to true peace. With that he was lost to the crowd. The loud sound of the rushing mob became deafening. In a daze, Naruto just stood there for a second before a man walking by stopped in front of him. He was tall and dressed entirely in a black full bodysuit and gray chest armor with a white animal mask painted to depict a dog. There you are, Namikaze-san. Your parents are worried sick about you. Let's get you back to your family. With that, Naruto was picked up and placed on the man's back with Naruto's arms wrapped around his neck. Then the two were gone, phasing from the crowd as if they were never there in the first place. Break. Was revealing yourself to the boy wise father? You know that he will tell his parents about you and how they will react. Kurama sat behind the same gate he sat behind for the past 6 years. His father, the Rikudo Sennin, using the power of his eyes, levitated several inches from the floor in meditative position with his shakuho resting on his lap. Kurama, let me ask you something. If one wishes to bring forth change, how must one go about it? Confront the current situation with the brashness of a bijudama, or with the grace of an artist's brushstroke? Knowing his father, Kurama merely sat quiet while the sage spoke his wisdom. A bijudama may bring about immediate change, but it is the change you wish it to be? Change is like a painting. It can have many colors and shapes, but if the artist is not careful, he will not create the work of art he had intended to create. Here the sage's eyes closed. If I were not make myself known to Naruto, then I run the risk of letting him slip through my fingers. His chakra is beginning to awaken. All he needs is for someone to teach him to unlock it. Then a teacher to help guide him to use it how it should be used. I am merely making my presence known, for when it comes time to introduce myself, he will be a bit more open to my presence in his mind. What of the Yamanaka? They will no doubt send into the boy's mind to discover your identity. Opening his eyes, Hagoromo's gaze met Kurama's. They will not send a mind walker here. Your presence, Kurama, deters them from trying. But if they decide that the boy's claims may reveal a possible threat, and they decide the risk of meeting me is necessary, they would meet you. And as powerful as you were, your recent changes to the Gaki's mindscape have left you with little power. Should they find you, then it would be enough to deem the boy truthful. If that happens, who knows what they will do? He would have went on with stating possible outcomes had it not been for the sage's calming hand resting on Kurama's large black nose. Be calm, Kurama. Faith is something that I have admittedly abused, and it has turned on me before. But I cannot allow my final gamble with faith to end as you have so pessimistically pointed out. Have more faith, Kurama. In this world scarred by endless war, faith is all we have. If not faith in my plan, have faith in me. With his words of wisdom spoken, the sage closed his rippled eyes again to continue meditation. Seeing as he had no real response to his father's words, he contented himself to lay his head on his hands and closed his eyes to sleep. But not without getting a final word in edgewise. I have always had faith in you, father. But I feel that you put your faith in a species doomed to destroy itself. Ask yourself this: is mankind worthy of redemption? Knowing all that humanity has done, and with your eyes seen what it will do. Not just to itself but to the very world? I feel that your faith in humanity is misplaced. But I suppose soon we shall see who is right. Let us watch together as the world either destroys itself, or is guided down the path you wish it to take. The sage remained quiet, the only evidence he had heard Kurama being the small frown that was now adorned his face. When the world finally stopped melding into a large blur, he was somewhere else. The smell of meat cooking reached his nose just as the sound of sizzling met his ears. Next thing he knew, Naruto was looking at a packed restaurant with open grills as tables. Still being carried by the dog-masked Anbu, Naruto looked around, still a bit dazed at all that had transpired. Catching a blur of red out of his peripheral vision, Naruto didn't have time to react before he felt himself yanked off of the man's back and into a soft, warm chest. "Oh my god, Sochi, are you hurt? Where were you? You had us worried sick. Never leave us like that again or I'll take away that book of yours, do you hear me, mister?" Blinking stupidly, Naruto felt himself released from the hug and placed on the ground in front of his mother, who had a firm yet tender grip on his arms. Unable to shake the daze, Kushina began to take notice of Naruto's odd blank expression before she slipped into old habits. She closely examined his expression again and made mental notes. Dilated pupils with little exposure to light, blank expression, seemingly lost in thought, non-responsive, and signs of chakra exposure, she thought in alarm. Genjutsu, she gaped in disbelief. Holding up a fist with her middle and index finger extended, she applied a light amount of pressure to Naruto's chest with the opposite hand and whispered, "Kai," harshly. The effects were instant. The glazed look in Naruto's eyes vanished, being replaced by recognition. "Kate-san," he asked in confusion. "Where am I? How'd I get here?" Feeling his mother grip on his arms, he looked at his mother, who was kneeling down to his height. "Kasan?" Seeing his honest confusion, she felt a swell of motherly fury burn in her chest. "Someone put my baby under an illusion. When I get my hands on them, I'll tear them apart." Feeling the rising killing intent of his mother, Naruto began to shake in fright. The aura she radiated resonated with something buried deep within every human. The need to live. The aura itself felt like it was trying to suffocate him, causing his chest to rise and fall in a lackluster attempt to draw in some much-needed oxygen. Apparently Kushina had felt his shaking, because when she focused in on him, the aura of death vanished. Bringing her son into a loving hug, she felt him hug her in return while still shaking. Over at the side was Minato talking with the white-masked man that had brought Naruto to them. "What happened, Inu? 1 minute Naruto is walking with us and the next he's gone. Now I hear he was put under a genjutsu? I want to know who put him under, and I want to know why. Now tell me, Kakashi. What was he doing when you found him?" His tone cold and harsh as ice with the eyes to match. Inu was kneeled at Minato's feet with his right arm resting on his knee. "Hokage-sama, Naruto was found on the main road leading outside of the village. I found him just standing there looking like he was in a trance. I stood in front of him for a whole minute waiting for him to acknowledge me. It was like he was looking through me to something behind me. I suggest we question him, see if he knows anything about the person who cast the genjutsu." Minato nodded with a scowl. Whoever had cast the genjutsu had done so in the middle of a ninja village in broad daylight. The fact a chakra spike wasn't felt from the patrolling Anbu forces was unsettling. Let alone the fact the assailant got was close enough to the Hokage's son to cast said genjutsu, and you have a reason to be worried. I'll talk to him myself. Send a message to the gate guards. No one gets in or out of the village until the person responsible is caught. Then report back to me to verify anything Naruto says. You were there, you may have seen him. Inu stood with a bow to his leader. "Hi, Hokage-sama." Next thing those witnessing the spectacle knew was Inu disappearing in a poof of smoke. Sighing to himself, he allowed a frown to etch its way to his lips before looking to the focal point of this whole scene. Naruto. Walking to the mother and son with Kana now allowing herself to be engulfed in their mother's embrace, he mentally prepared himself for the inevitable backlash he would get for his next actions. Naruto, being the first to notice his father's approach, began to pull away from Kushina to get to Minato. Minato saw the expectant look his son was sending him and the gesture for a hug, but he steeled himself against the action. "Naruto, I need to ask you if you noticed anything strange before you were brought here by Inu. Did you perhaps bump into someone, look into someone's eyes, maybe heard something you don't normally hear in Konoha?" Feeling a bit hurt that his father wasn't going to give him a hug, Naruto looked down at his sandal-covered feet to escape the cold gaze his father was leveling at him. This was a part of his father he hasn't seen before, and he wasn't exactly sure if he wanted to continue seeing it. Well, no, I was just walking forward drawing in my book when something strange happened." Narrowing his eyes, Minato urged him to continue. "Strange? Yeah, I couldn't hear everyone like normal. That was what made me look up. I didn't see him at first, but then this weird guy came out of nowhere and walked into me. Then he starts saying this really weird stuff about how I should look around me and maybe I would see something that others can't. Then he started talking about something. I can't remember everything, but I do remember him saying something even weirder. He looked unsure, hesitant, scared. Any of these words could be used to describe the confusion. Go on, maybe I can help figure it out. He really didn't care, but anything this person said could be used to identify him in the future, so Minato would take what he could get. He said something like, T2 become, 1, I think. Does that make sense to San? He hoped it did. He really wasn't lying when he said he couldn't remember everything the man had said. It was just really confusing. Minato narrowed his eyes in thought before looking to Kushina and Kana, who was watching all of this transpire with their own amount of worry. Kushina had her own thoughts on the subject but wouldn't publicly announce it. Turning back to his son, he gazed into his son's eyes, watching how the emotions projected themselves. Confusion and a bit of fear. Naruto, I need you to tell me what he looked like. Can you do that for me? Naruto frowned in thought. He wore a hood. I didn't see his face. But he had a staff. Minato frowned. That wasn't much to go on. But if that was all, then it would need to be verified by Inu when he returned. Sighing, he looked to his shaken son and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and gave a comforting squeeze. Alright, I'll have to verify that with Inu when he gets back, but for now let's get back to our plans for the day. Giving his son a warm smile in contrast to his previously cold disposition, he turned with Naruto in tow and walked to the other two members of his family. Break. Naruto and Kana both sighed with a mix of boredom and frustration. Kana, being the most vocal of the two, was the one to voice her boredom. Tucson tilde, she whined. Why are we doing this stuff now? I thought we were supposed to do this earlier? She finished off her complaint with a pout only a child could give. Minato sighed at his daughter's antics. Kami knew he loved her, but sometimes her antics were really irritating. Because of Naruto's earlier disappearing act. Here Naruto hung his head in shame. We had to postpone stopping earlier. So we need to do it now if we want to make it home in time for the party after stopping at the clan estates. Naruto had disappeared for a grand 2 hours. An insulting time for the village's shinobi forces. But the blame couldn't entirely be placed on the village defenders. Whoever it was that had placed the genjutsu over Naruto knew what he was doing. Inu's earlier claim was proof of this. Flashback. Minato stood in the now unoccupied public restroom with Inu kneeling at his feet. Inu, earlier my son said that a man with a hood had bumped into him and given him a few choice words. You didn't report a man with this description when you dropped Naruto off, explain. Hearing the dangerous tone in the Hokage's voice, Inu bowed just an inch lower to show his obedience. Hokage-sama, I did not see a man matching that description with Naruto when I discovered him. Hearing the claim, Minato's eyes narrowed dangerously. Then this puts me in a dangerous position, Inu. While I will not immediately write you off as a traitor, I need evidence from you that would support your claim. The no-nonsense tone was clear and the hidden warning was obvious. Tread carefully, Inu. Inu's posture visibly stiffened while the man's mind worked to find a solution to the dilemma they found themselves in. He mentally went over all the evidence that they had gathered from the moment Naruto came out of the genjutsu. Wait, genjutsu. Comforted by the thought, Inu's stiff posture relaxed slightly. Hokage-sama, the genjutsu Naruto was put under. Do you know of the genjutsu's effect on his mind? Intrigued by the question and running a few possible scenarios in his head, Minato gave Inu the desired information. Unfortunately, no, Inu, my wife dispelled it in her haste to bring Naruto out of it. Nodding at the response, Inu gave his input. I believe that the genjutsu used on Naruto was the target's way of communicating with Naruto without being detected by possible observers. I wouldn't know how or when the genjutsu was cast, but it is likely that it was cast using the sound of the crowd in the market district when you were last with him. Genjutsu that hamper a subject's sense of direction is commonly used in hunter-nin squad tactics. A similar technique could have been used here to separate you from him. The technique itself requires so little chakra to perform that even Kushina-sama's famous chakra detection skills wouldn't have picked up on the subtle manipulation. Finishing his theory, Inu went quiet while Minato stood thinking on all that he had heard. That would explain both how Naruto lost track of us and how no one was able to detect them. He would have already fled the scene the moment the genjutsu was cast if it was prepared beforehand. If that is the case, then there wouldn't be any hope that this target would still be in the village. They would have realized their cover was compromised and fled immediately after the act. And considering there has been no signs of a fire in any of the common hotels, this hunter could have left a trail for us to follow. Have Anbu squads 12, 13, and 15 discreetly search the hotel rooms of all hotels within 3 blocks of the market district and the gate. We don't need to send the civilians into a panic when no visible harm has been done. Inu nods in understanding before standing to attention. With a bow he leaves in another poof of smoke, leaving Minato to himself. Sighing in frustration, Minato looks into the closest mirror, gazing into his reflection. Maybe Hiruzen had the right idea, giving his soul to the Shinigami. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm getting too old for this shit. Washing up, Minato was just about to leave the washroom before an odd chill shot down his spine. Immediately he pulled out 2 tri-pronged kunai and held them up to his face in a reverse grip while turning to face the middle of the room. Only to see no one there. Glancing around the room, Minato searched for the source of that odd chill. Searching every shadow with a scrutinizing glance, looking for even the smallest distortion in the air for any sign of a threat. But when he looked into the mirror he was inspecting himself in earlier, his heart nearly froze at the sight that greeted him. A dry, mirthless, evil chuckle echoed through the small room. One he knew was very familiar. He, oh Yondaime, how the mighty have fallen. There, gazing through the lone eye hole on an oddly designed mask, was the red eye of Madara Uchiha. Make your choice, Yondaime. Your children, or your village. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Minato blinked once and the image was gone, being replaced by his own reflection, still standing there with his kunai ready to gut a would-be attacker. Looking around the room again, he found nothing out of place. Taking a breath to calm his nerves, he was spooked again by a knock at the bathroom door. Minato-kun, the kids are done eating and ready to leave, hurry up. Taking one last glance after calming down, he replaced the kunai before walking out to meet his anxious wife. His mind replaying what his hallucinate had said over and over again. Minato-kun, are you alright? You look like you saw a ghost. Kushina whispered to her husband with worry evident in her tone. Smiling down at Kushina, he reassured her. Yeah, Kushi-chan, I'm fine. My nerves are acting up a bit, that's all. He could almost hear that maniacal laugh from 6 years ago to greet his response. Flashback end. Standing in front of a tall mirror mounted on the wall was Naruto, lost in deep thought, rolling his newly acquired necklace in the palm of his hand. It was an odd piece of jewelry, being an unbalanced S, with the bottom curve being smaller and shorter than the upper curve, not to mention it reached further from the jewelry's center. The entire thing was white and black respectively. As he studied it, he remembered the curious words left to him by the kind jewelry store owner. This necklace is lonely, you know. It is only half of the original. But before I give this to you, there was a poem that goes with it. Remember it well. Metal of white, the guiding light. Metal of black, searching for the path back. Twins at birth, separated by the clashing earth. The journey begins when the heart breaks. Be the end when the chosen wakes. The journey home shatters the heart. The broken mended by chosens depart. During the entire poem he had felt that strange sensation again. Just like when that weird monk spoke to him. He felt like seeing something that isn't really there. You feel like what you're seeing can't be real, but there is always that small part of you that lingers on the what if. His gaze drifting off the necklace, he examined his new outfit in the mirror to make sure he wasn't missing anything. His untamed blonde, white hair as spiky as ever. A snow-white kimono was draped over his shoulders and gray t-shirt like his father had told him, and a pair of black silk pants tapped at the ankles with white bandages. His feet remained bare. Sighing to himself, he let the necklace slip through his fingers and fall to its place on his chest. Tonight's the night we finally get our answer. He whispered to himself anxiously. He may seem like a confident boy at first glance, but he was still just a kid with his own hopes and dreams. Beside that, what boy doesn't want to follow in his father's footsteps? I hope they finally decide to train us. Turning away from the mirror, Naruto walked to his door and stepped out into the hallway. He was expected downstairs when he was ready to help greet the guests like a proper host, or so says his two-san. Walking through the house, he considered his anxiety for but a moment. His fear of himself and his twin being rejected, training for what would make several times. His hopes being dashed again. He wasn't sure if he could take it. Finally touching down on the first floor in the living room, Naruto was met with the sight of his family waiting for him. His two san now dressed in the ceremonial white Hokage robes with a white triangular hat with the kanji for fire shadow engraved in red on the front. His mother was now dressed in a modest red kimono with the only other color present being the black sash that held the kimono closed. His sister though was dressed in clothing similar to his own, except her kimono was full length and wasn't draped over her shoulders like his was, and was held closed by a bright red sash. Seeing him standing there, his mother beckoned him to stand with her at the door with the rest of his family. Taking his spot, his mother kneeled next to him with her smile widening when she examined him further. "Oh, my Sochi is such a handsome boy. That nice seamstress really did a good job with this, didn't she, Minato-kun? What about you, Sochi? How do you feel in this?" Blushing a bit embarrassed at how she was treating him, he whined a bit. "Ka-chan, it's fine, you're embarrassing me." Giggling a bit at Naruto's childish antics, she softly ran her fingers through his spiky hair. "But it's Ka-san's job to show all the love she can to her precious babies." She quoted this with a motherly kiss to the head. She straightened his kimono, and with a few pats here and there stood with a loving smile on her face. Turning back towards the door after repositioning herself to hug Minato's arm, there was a knock. Kana and Naruto stood together, each with their own thoughts and expressions. Naruto tried his best to portray his happiness at turning 6 today with a smile, but anyone who looked could see it didn't quite reach his eyes. Kana though didn't have to try to portray anything. She was genuinely happy today was their birthday, so her smile easily lit up the room. When the person who knocked was let in by the two parents, Naruto and Kana both bowed in respect. High-standing clans, or noble clans, often share common physical traits specific to that clan's specialty. The Inuzuka were animal lovers and trackers, so their physical appearance portray them to be more wild than the average person. "Good evening, Inuzuka-san, my family and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come and enjoy my children's birthday with us." The now identified Inuzuka gave a smile that, while many would assume to be feral from appearance alone, portrayed a hint of mischief. "Really, Minato-kun, I've told you before I hate formality outside council meetings. If you don't start calling me Sume or Sume-chan, I'll start giving you motivation to." Her already feral smile inched upwards while the mischief in her eye grew more evident. Minato laughed sheepishly. "Sorry Sume, force of habit." Waving it off, Sume acted fast and pulled the redhead woman watching from Minato's arm into a big hug. "Good to see ya again, Red. Ever since you shackled yourself to this stiff, you haven't been coming by the Inuzuka compound to visit anymore." She seemed to pout, but it was obvious she was only messing with the woman. Kushina laughed lightly at Sume's pout and returned the hug. "Sorry Sume-chan, but raising my babies takes top priority. You should know, considering your own kids." Sume laughed a bit weaker. "Yeah, I suppose I do. Speaking of which." She turned to gaze out the door and shouted with an edge in her tone. "Kiba, stop marking your territory and get in here. Hana, get a better grip on the triplets or next time they can stay with Kuromaru back at the compound. You begged me to let you bring them, and you promised to keep a tight leash on them. So get to it. Now grab the runts and get in here." The family watched a bit nervously at the sudden change in demeanor from the animalistic woman. Almost crawling in on his hands and knees was a little boy around the twins' age with dark brown hair spiked up in every directions. The hair alone was enough to show the resemblance between the kid and the older woman. Next, walking in with a trio of puppies following at her heels, was a young girl a bit older than the twins by a few years. Her hair, while also as brown as the boys', was smooth compared to both. While it did have a few strands that shot out in different directions, you wouldn't notice unless actively looking for them. Both kids were dressed in white kimonos with the area around the ribs imprinted with black claw marks. The boy looked embarrassed while the girl looked sheepish. "Cousin, why do we have to wear these things? They're so uncomfortable and they make me itchy." To emphasize his point, the boy reached into the kimono and scratched chest. The girl, Hana, sighed in embarrassment. "Mutt, we're at a clan heir's birthday party. You can't go running off without clothes on during stuff like this." She scolded with a small glare at the younger boy. Said, Mutt growled in anger, only succeeding in making himself seen as cute to everyone in the room. "I'm an alpha Hana Baka. Treat me with the respect I deserve." He would have said more, but a glare from his mother instantly cowed him. Sume turned away from glaring at Kiba and sighed in embarrassment. Sorry about them, Kiba was dropped on his head by his idiotic father when he was little, well, littler. Hana is being trained to take my spot as the head of the clan when she comes of age. So she is a bit smart-mouthed at times. Kiba, hearing of his sister's training, growled again. Not if I can beat her first. Then I'll take over as heir of the clan. In response to his loud claim, the pups behind Hana growled at him. Care to try your luck now, mutt? She whispered mockingly. Naruto and Kana, who watched this, was struggling to keep from snickering out loud. Minato was obviously amused if the smile on his face was anything to go by. Kushina didn't bother hiding her mirth. She chuckled with a shake of her head. It's no problem, Sume-chan, I think it's cute. He's like a puppy. Kiba turns red with embarrassment and turns away with a huff. Minato coughs to get attention back on him. While it's certainly good to see you again, Sume, perhaps we could finish the conversation later. Perhaps after all the guests are greeted. Naruto, Kana, go introduce yourselves to Kiba-kun and Hana-chan, then show them to the gardens and come back. The twins bowed to their father as they had been taught to do for such situations before turning to leave with the Inuzuka kids in tow. When the group left the room, Minato turned to the two women, whispering to each other and snickering on occasion. Seeing the two, he sighed. Do I even want to know? The twins were having their own conversations with their guests. Well, I guess we should start off by saying, hi. My name is Naruto Namikaze, and starting today I'll be 6 years old. I like a lot of things, my family is one. I don't like a few things, our parents not training me for one. My dream is to be a ninja like Toussaint and become Hokage one day. He finished with a smile. Kana snickered at her brother's introduction. You forgot to say, I like copying Kakashi Oni-san. Ignoring her now pouting brother, Kana started her own introduction. My name's Kana, it's awesome to meet you too. I like cooking, my family, and pranking Toussaint. I don't like how Kasen and Toussaint don't train us and how slow I learned to cook. I want to be a ninja like Kasen and Toussaint and become a senin like Oba-chan. Finishing her introduction, the two Inuzuka smirked at her enthusiasm. Kiba opened his mouth to say something, but it was covered by Hana before he could. The name's Inuzuka Hana. I'm this mutt's older sister and the heiress of the Inuzuka clan. These three, she pointed over her shoulder to the three pups that had followed them, are the Haimaru brothers and my companions. I'm 10 and in my second year of the academy. I like my companions, my mutt of a little brother, my mom, and my clan. I don't like how the triplets don't listen to me sometimes, but a bit of training can change that. I also don't like cats, or the flea baths mom makes us take every month because of the smell. My dream is to be the greatest clan head the Inuzuka have ever had. She finished proudly. Kiba finally got fed up with his sister lightly bit her hand enough to sting. Hana helped in pain and quickly retracted her hand, glaring at Kiba heatedly. Finally free, he introduced himself loudly. Name's Kiba, I like dogs, playing in the mud and my clan. I hate it that my sister is the heir of the clan and taking baths. I will beat Hana when I get older and get my companion, and I'll finally become the heir. His tone dripping with pride and determination. Hana rolled her eyes with a mocking smile. Maybe in 100 years, Baka. 'Cause that's how many years ahead of you that I am. Kiba smiled mischievously. So you're saying you're old? He didn't even see the fist coming. 1 second he's standing proud at his chance to get Hana back for all the teasing and insults. The next he's seeing stars while becoming intimately familiar with the floor. Kana laughed at the display the siblings put on and clapped with joy. Naruto did little more than smile with mirth. Finally the walk and, by default, their conversation ended when the two opened a sliding door that led outside. We'll try to talk to you guys more during the party. But we have to get back soon, okay? See ya. Naruto slid the door closed again after getting waved off. Sighing to himself, he turned back to his sister, who had already started walking back the way they came. Jogging to catch up to her, the two didn't get very far before they started to hear the sounds of loud laughter coming from the living room. Entering, the two were greeted to the sight of a room filled with people and kids their own age. Most of which were from clans. Some that weren't easily recognizable were obviously from a civilian clan. Their father, who had noticed them walk in, smiled and waved them over. Well everyone, I'd like to introduce my children and the guests of honor for this party, Naruto and Kana Namikaze. The room of people each gave their own greeting. Now while my kids show all of the children to the garden to play and eat, I thought I would take this chance with all of my fellow clan heads to talk about something in private. Naruto, Kana, if you would. Kana, getting excited at meeting so many new people and possible friends, quickly grabbed her brother and dashed out the door with all the kids following them out. Kushina, sending a worried glance Minato's way, and follows after the kids to keep an eye on them and shuts the door as soon as she leaves the room. The moment the door closed, Minato's expression melted from warm to neutral in a split second. Now that all the young ears are gone, let's get down to business. I am sure a lot of you are aware of my son being found with a genjutsu cast on him. This meeting is to discuss how we deal with the ramifications of the genjutsu. A man lounging on the couch with a pineapple haircut raised a lazy hand to bring attention to himself. Troublesome, Hokage-sama. Do we know why the genjutsu was cast? Minato nods. An Anbu agent has given me some idea. Considering Naruto wasn't left mentally scarred means that the assailant wasn't aiming to hurt Naruto. Inu gave the possibility that they were trying to make contact with Naruto without being discovered. It was also theorized that this person has knowledge on Hunter Nin strategy and techniques. The man nods. If that is the case, then I'd like to propose a few possibilities. Go ahead, Shikaku. Shikaku sat up straight and interlaced his fingers together before resting his head on his folded hands. Because of what you've told us so far, we can safely assume that this person wants something he feels that your son can give him. The list in what it could be is endless, but I'm only going to give the highest probable possibilities. Money being one, your Hiraishin technique being two, or the most likely possibility. Here Shikaku closed his eyes and released a quite troublesome before continuing. Your bloodline. Minato stood quietly while Shikaku spoke, but an eye twitch showed he was more affected than he would willingly show. It may not even be your bloodline he could be after. If memory serves, wasn't Kushina a part of an abduction plot by Kumo to breed a new Uzumaki clan loyal to them? It could have been Cloud attempting to sway your son to leave the village with the secrets of the Uzumaki sealing vault. There is no way to tell who was responsible until we can discover what the assailant was trying to achieve. I recommend we have a few Hyuga watch the boy from a distance until this blows over. Normal Anbu would easily be picked up by someone with the assumed skill. Shikaku finished speaking with a small sigh. The surrounding clan heads started speaking out their own theories and possible solutions, but Minato kept going back to what Shikaku had said. By the time 10 minutes had passed, the room had gone quiet, waiting for Minato to respond. But when he did, it confused a few of them. I suppose this makes the choice easier now. Break. A rippled eye snapped open. So the choice has been made. I suppose it is time to move my piece. Kurama. Behind the owner of the rippled eye, a blood-red eye twice the size of a full-grown man opened behind a set of large silver gates. Due to me transferring my chakra to the boy, I am left without a means of pulling him here without his permission. Would you mind drawing him here when the time comes for us to meet? It would appear he will need us sooner than we had planned. Kurama released a tired sigh before standing to his full height. The dark area was finally given light, revealing the new mindscape that Hagoromo had spent so much time on. The previous sewer-themed mindscape was but a distant memory. In its place was a long open ocean. Spires of sea stone rose into the blue sky. The bars of Kurama's cage ran off with seemingly no end in opposite directions. In front of the paper seal was a long platform of sand that led to a speck in the distance. But what really drew the attention away from this scene of beauty was the blackened sky signaling a coming storm on the horizon. How will I know when the time is right, father? The large mass of energy puffed out a yawn, causing the calm ocean water around him to ripple and churn. Hagoromo looked to be in deep thought. It would be best if you pulled him here when he falls asleep. Any sooner and people would become suspicious. In order to properly train Naruto, he must first experience one of the 6 paths of pain. A path we must all face at some time in our lives. The human path. He must learn that fear is a driving force in decisions, and those decisions do not always create the best solution. His father will be the one to teach him this lesson. Nakato may have experienced this path, but by failing to learn the true value of the lesson, she became a prisoner to the human path. Doomed to forever be driven by her darker emotions, to make decisions without true forethought in how they will affect the lives of those around her. Kurama blinked at this but nodded in understanding. I see, father. If I may ask, is this what the Uchiha fall to awaken their Mangekyo Sharingan? Hagoromo didn't even hesitate to answer. Yes, the Sharingan is the manifestation of dark emotion. By losing something or someone precious to them, the Uchiha are often driven to lash out. Madara was an example of this for a time. But when he came to accept Hashirama's ideals of peace, the true power of his Sharingan awoke, thus allowing him to grow ever stronger to protect what he does have left. It was such a shame when Madara fell once again to his darker emotions. Now without the limit he had before, he was able to continue to grow stronger. Hagoromo took a moment to regain his breath before continuing. It was always Uchiha that overcame the Sharingan's curse of hatred, as it is commonly known as, that became the pinnacle of their generation. Uchiha Itachi is another example of this. My eyes saw all he has been through to make his father and his clan proud. If it were not for what is to come, then I am sure Indra would have chosen him to be his transmigrant. Indra, as hard as he wished to hide it, had loved his family dearly. To massacre them would have been too much for Indra to tolerate. At least with the planned death of Itachi, Indra would feel at peace knowing a traitor to his family would have been dealt with and much easier for him to emotionally handle. I see. Before further conversation could take place, the mindscape shook and the once calm ocean that was Naruto's mind became a sea of monstrous waves that rocked the chakra construct. Hagoromo would have been soaked had it not been for the invisible field of energy he was using to repel the water. What's going on, Tucson? The Biju's question was a brief headshake. This is the physical representation of Naruto's subconscious mind. The land I stand on is the stability of his mind. As he grows older, he will subconsciously create more. The sky represents his mood, which will constantly change. The water represents his emotional stability. If he is calm, so is the ocean. If he is sad, it will rain. More aggressive dark emotions will be mirrored through the ocean's behavior. Sporadic waves means his emotions are running rampant with the memories that caused them. The two held their ground for several minutes before everything began to calm down, only to be replaced by a moderately light rainfall followed by the darkening sky as day turned to night. It would appear he has finally drifted off to sleep. Kurama, it is time we meet him. Break. Several minutes ago. The party, while wild to the children, was rather tame for the adults, but it did last for a few hours. By the time the children were tired, Minato had called all the guests to the garden to present gifts from each of the clans. Each gift was held within a scroll given by the children of the clans present. But shortly after the last gift was given, Minato separated from his wife, who sent him a questioning look, but he ignored it. When he stood in front of the throng of people, he let loose his authoritative aura, which drew everyone's attention. First off, I'd like to thank all the kids for coming to play with my two troublemakers. Letting the indignant shouts of his kids and the laughter of the crowd die down, he continued. This morning my son asked if today meant he and his twin would finally be trained to be shinobi, and I told him that his mother and I would talk about it and give our answer, if not during, then after the party. Well, we talked and we came to our conclusion after the events that took place earlier today. He ignored his wife's eyes that were now boring into his skull with her glare and did everything he could to shrug off the feeling of death that radiated off of her. Naruto, this is also an apology to you. The moment the words were uttered, Naruto focused more on his father's words with confusion. Why was he apologizing? Naruto, we feel that someone was trying to manipulate you. As far as we know, this wasn't the first time this has happened. So to keep you safe, we have decided it would be better if you did not receive shinobi training. The world stopped moving for Naruto. He couldn't breathe, he couldn't focus, he could only stand there and blink stupidly at what he had just heard. What? Hearing the confused tone, Minato took in a deep breath and steeled his resolve. Naruto, you can't be a ninja. You said you would think about. The words came out as a whisper. The tone held a lot of confusion, sadness and other mixed feelings. And we decided to train Kana. We felt that it would endanger you further if you were trained. Kana hasn't been put under a genjutsu like you have. You are being targeted by someone for something. Until we can find out what that is, we can't train you for not just your safety, but for the villages. He's lying, a voice whispered in the back of Naruto's mind. It sounded strangely familiar, but he couldn't quite remember where he heard it from. Can't or won't? Naruto, you need to calm down. Minato said, a bit harsher than he meant to. Naruto slightly flinched at the harsh tone his father used but didn't back down. There was a burning sensation in his chest that bubbled up his throat. His face felt hot and his head hurt. He didn't know what was going on, but he did know one thing. He was angry. No, I deserve training just as much as Kana does. You can't do this to me. Naruto. Minato snapped. I am your father, you will not raise your voice at me any more than you already have. I understand you're upset, but screaming like a spoiled brat isn't how your mother or I raised you. Now we'll talk about this later, go up to your room and calm down. Your mother or I will be up to talk to you about this later when you're calm. Don't leave that room until your mother or I say so. Turning away from Naruto, his gaze met Kushina's. He really didn't like what he saw in her eyes. Untold fury, and a promise of pain and suffering if he didn't properly explain why he did what he did just now at a later time. He wanted to argue, Kami knows he did. But his father's tone had grown several degrees colder as his harsh reprimand continued until finally he couldn't even recognize him. The person who was scolding him wasn't the goofy dad he remembered from this morning. That warm feeling of fatherly love his father aimed with his gaze was gone, replaced by two cold chips of ice that hurt to hold for longer than a second. It honestly scared him, so he turned away, and even then he had to suppress the urge to shiver from the gaze he could feel boring into his back, walked back into the house and up to his room. Even now, sitting against his door in the cold dark room, he remembered the feeling. Those eyes simply wouldn't leave him alone. Who are you? He finally choked out in a whisper. T2-san would never look at me like that. Finally the emotional storm that was his mind settled on three feelings: hurt, sadness and dejection. So he did what all kids did when they feel wronged. He cried himself to sleep, still leaning against the door on the cold, hard, unforgiving floor. Break. When he awoke, it wasn't in his bed, nor was it on the floor of his room. But it was on a pristine sandy beach with sand almost as white as snow. The loud crashing of waves and the salty smell of seawater. This was the first sight that greeted his opening eyes. Huh? Where am I? How'd I get here? Wanting to learn about his new surroundings, Naruto put his hands down on the sandy ground and pushed. Only for his hands to sink all the way up to the shoulder. Now being a bit freaked out, he tried again, only this time he actually started to sink. Help. Someone, anyone. I'm sinking. He was now officially angled to where he would be standing if he were on solid ground. But he was still sinking, and his struggling only made it worse. It was up to his head when that familiar voice from before reached his ears. Stop struggling, child. You are only making it worse. Hearing the source from behind him, he did as instructed and immediately noticed the change. Instead of the quick sinking, it was now a lot slower. He dared not move, even to see the person who helped him. Please help me, I'm scared. All was quiet for a moment before a tired sigh came from behind him again. I cannot, this place holds a lot of power. More than I currently have at my disposal. You will have to get yourself out. I see, can't, Naruto whimpered out with the little hope the presence behind him brought being shattered like so much glass. Listen, child, this place is ruled by emotion. The ground is only as stable as the one who stands on it. You are troubled, speak to me your problems and allow me to help you solve them. Naruto didn't know what the stranger meant, but since he felt like he was going to sink anyway, he might as well talk until then. Today was my birthday. This morning I asked Tucson if he would train me and Kana to be shinobi. He said he would think about it. But later on at the party he told me he was only going to train Kana. Why only her? I was the one that asked. So you wish it was you who received training instead of your sister? That is very selfish of you, child. Realizing how what he said would sound in the ears of a stranger panicked a bit. No, never. I love Kana, and only meant that we should have been trained together. I would never ask for her to be ignored for me. The voice was quiet for a moment before he heard a hum. Whether it was of approval or not remained to be seen. I see, so you're angry that your father didn't choose both of you. Do you know why he didn't? Naruto watched a Bible of sand pop in front of him and gulped. The sand, while slow, was still consuming him, though now it was inching its way up his neck. He said that training me would put me in danger. He said that some guy who used a Jijutsu on me would come back if he did. The voice hummed again before sighing. He was afraid of the possibility of what could be done with you. That brought Naruto's attention away from his current predicament and tried to turn his head a bit to look at whoever was behind him. Tucson was afraid of me? His sinking quickly forgotten for the new conversation. In his peripheral vision he was able to spot a blur of white but no major detail. Not of you specifically, boy. But what you could do if this person who used a genjutsu on you managed to bring you to their way of thinking later on down the road. He let his fear of a possible future cloud his better judgment. He reared what could come from losing you to his enemies. Do you remember, Naruto, what I told you when we first met? What are you? From his peripheral vision the white blur moved, floated, from behind him to the side, and even more until the source from the earlier voice now sat floating in mid-air in front of him. An elderly man with spiky white hair and a pair of horns protruding from his forehead dressed in white priest robes. Why you're him, that guy the first saw. You're the reason Tucson isn't training us both. The elderly sage opened his once closed rippled eyes and stared down into the boy's own. Am truly to blame? Yes, I cast the genjutsu on you so we may talk without interruption from those around us. But I was not the one who decided it would be best to abandon you for your sister. That is how you feel, is it not, abandoned? Both went quiet at the sage's words. Finally, after a minute had passed, the sage continued again. You never answered my question, Naruto Uzumaki. Do you remember what I told you the first time we met? Naruto stayed silent for a bit, trying to remember what the sage had said. Finally, after what felt like minutes, he felt the memory surface. You said to look for things others can't see. The elderly sage nodded minutely at his words. Specifically, I had said to keep your eyes open. If you do, you may see something not many are privileged to, but close enough for one your age. Remember all that was said during your argument with your father. Did he perchance mention the village at any point during your argument? Thinking back on it, he did remember saying something about the village. Yeah, but why is that important? Hey, wait a second. He finally realized, trying to bring his hand up to point at the old man only to remember his current predicament. Who are you? The elder gave a sad smile while his rippled eyes shut briefly. I am just an old fool looking to fix my past mistakes, young Jinchuriki. At the mention of his shared status with his twin, Naruto merely blinked. But if you wish to know my name, allow us to finish our earlier conversation. In exchange, when it is finished, I will tell you my name. Deal? The sage didn't even wait to get a response. Did your father mention the safety of the village specifically? Naruto, wondering where the floating old man was going with this conversation, merely nodded to confirm the question. It was a slip of the tongue for a man like him, young Jinchuriki. Not all of the pieces of this puzzle have been gathered, so the picture it will paint will be very vague. So until you understand everything, please be silent. Naruto obviously wanted to say something, but the commanding tone in the elderly man's voice held his tongue. Minato Namikaze is a man seen as the strongest shinobi since Hashirama Senju. But strength cannot be described just one way. Strength of will, to stand against overwhelming odds and return the victor. Strength of mind, to understand the way all life works and follow the path that leads to the greatest outcome. Strength of heart, to follow your ambition to the very end regardless of the obstacles you face. Strength of body, to be able to move through life's obstacles with brute force. What Minato Namikaze lacks is the strength of will. Hey, wait a minute, Uteme. Tucson is a good person. Even if he isn't gonna train me, he still protects me with everything he has. Here the elder sage narrowed his rippled eyes at the boy. I suppose it is to be expected, that is what you believe. So allow me to enlighten you, boy. But be warned, what you will soon learn will break you. It will force you to question everything you have ever known to be true. So with that ominous warning, he finally began, revealing a side of Konoha's Kiroi Senku that no one outside of the Shinobi Council has ever seen. With but a wave of his shakuho, a mirror appeared in front of Naruto, blocking off his view of the great sage. After a moment of looking at his reflection, the mirror's surface rippled and the image shifted. Where he once saw himself, he saw a room that looked vaguely familiar. If he remembered right, what he was seeing was the spitting image of the Konoha Council chambers. He has only been in it a handful of times, for when his mother had been too busy to watch them and Minato had to take them to his office while working. Looking closer, he could see his father standing in the middle of the U-shaped table with a strange look on his face while gazing into the filled seats of the entire council. What is this? He found himself whispering, not expecting an answer from the mysterious sage. What you see now is an event in the life of Namikaze Minato. This event took place a day after the Kyuubi attack. I will fill in anything you miss after this plays. So watch carefully. This may reveal a side of your father you didn't know existed. Break. Konoha Council Chambers, October 11th. Hokage-sama, the reports from the Kyuubi's assault had been handed in to me earlier today, if you wish for me to read aloud. Saying so as if requesting permission without actually asking. Go ahead, Takehito-san. Hi Hokage-sama. Due to the Kyuubi's rampage, the damage report centers around 200 acres of the Nara's 500 acres forest, with an extra 100 acres being exposed to the Kyuubi's poisonous chakra, thus slowly dying. All of the deer within radius of ground zero and the poisonous chakra are either dead or dying due to chakra poisoning. Due to a strong wind coming in from Suna, the airborne chakra of Kyuubi had also been blown into the socialist district, leaving buildings unharmed, but countless bodies have been, and still are being, recovered. The man briefly paused to let this morbid news settle in the hearts of all present. Due to this, the death toll has been set at 20% civilian and 35% shinobi population. Worried whispers began breaking out amongst the council while Minato narrowed his eyes in thought. An elderly man sitting 2 seats to the left of Minato gripped his cane tight enough to strain the wood. Casualties are another staggering 10% civilian and 40% shinobi populace. 5% of the civilian casualty population is gravely wounded and dying, while the remaining 5% had only received career-ending injuries. The shinobi population has 30% gravely injured and another 10% with career-ending injuries and below. The whispers got a bit louder until Minato raised his killing intent sharply, purposely silencing the entire council in moments. Continued Takehito-san. Hi, the corrosive chakra of the Kyuubi has several crippled the walls of Konoha. Recommendation from the head foreman suggests tearing down the worn section of the wall and rebuilding it. The foreman says that the wood holding it together is hollowed and dried out, and a majority of the stone was turned to dust. Reports state that several businesses and restaurants have been destroyed. The estimated total cost for repairs tallies to 50 million ryo. That is all. With the reports given, the room went deathly quiet, with the only thing moving being the pacing Hokage. When he had started to pace, no one knew. All that could be focused on now was the predicament they found themselves in and what it would mean to their way of life. Traditionally, it was the Hokage that would speak to the people and give them hope. But with Minato currently lost in his thoughts, another had to take a stand. Particularly a crippled old man that hardly anyone in the room liked but begrudgingly respected. So what? The silence suddenly being broken brought the attention of the entire room. Konoha has lived through 2 world wars. This wouldn't be the first time we were caught unprepared. We do as we always have in such situations. We pick up the slack our dead left for us and we move on. We need a way to show the world that while Konoha is weakened, it is far from defenseless. Luckily for us, our beloved Yondaime has gifted us 2 somethings. Yesterday our Yondaime sealed the yin and yang halves of Kyuubi's chakra into his newborn children. With them as deterrents for war, we have at most 20 years to regain our previous strength. No Danzo, I will not allow it. My children are just that, children. They don't even perceive the world around them yet, and you ask me to turn them into the village's weapons? Have you gone mad? Danzo tapped his cane lightly on the floor and focused his single good eye in meeting Minato's gaze. Would you have us sit here and have us caught by surprise again, them Hokage-sama? With repairs taking up the remainder of the genin and a portion of the surviving chunin rolls and the ranks of our jonin devastated, we are stretched thin as it is. Look beyond your love for your children, Namikaze Minato. To protect them would be to train them as soon as possible. If we don't have a deterrent, then you are inviting war into our nation. Would you want for your children to be captured because of Kumo desiring an Uzumaki, much like they attempted with Uzumaki-san? He knew he had won when the tightly suppressed killing intent of the Hokage was felt. From the man's shaking fists, it was easy to see he had hit a nerve in the seemingly impenetrable man. I will release their status as Jinchuriki to the public later today. But when they will be trained, how they will train and how they will be treated is left to me, understood? Danzo rolled the thought around for a moment before nodding his head. Agreeable Hokage-sama, you will have your way. If I may make a suggestion? Although weary of what else the old warhawk would try, he nodded his head. As much as he didn't like what Danzo had suggested and wished he could have the man executed, he knew that if word reached the daimyo of an unlawful execution done by his hands, it could mean his tenure as Hokage being terminated within days after he was sworn in. A dictatorship it may be, but the daimyo's alliance with the samurai of Iron Country and their numbers would be the end of Konoha. Even with the borrowed time being given to us using Konoha's Jinchuriki, there is no absolute guarantee that we will be back on our feet before a more ambitious hidden village makes an attempt at stealing our place as the strongest hidden village. In order to account for this, I would like to suggest lifting the order to disband my root Anbu so as to infiltrate, gather information and, if necessary, eliminate any discovered threats to Konoha and its recovery. Minato didn't even hesitate to deny the man his request. Denied Shimura Danzo, your root has proven time and time again that it is only loyal to you and only you. Not only that, but your methods of creating them are inhuman. The only reason Sarutobi didn't shut you down sooner was because at the time of Root's creation Konoha was on the verge of destruction. We are not yet at that level of desperation, Danzo, and if I have any say in it then we never will. Now if that is all, then you are all dismissed. I have papers to sign and deals to make with a few foreign emissaries. Break. The area was quiet for a bit, but the sage found now an appropriate time to speak. Do you see no, young Jinchuriki? The mirror had gone transparent when the sage tapped its surface, allowing both people to see each other. No, Tucson did what he did so we could live safely. Why are you against that? The sage frowned with a mix of frustration and disappointment. Naruto Namikaze, do you know why your father was chosen to be the Hokage? At this Naruto smiled a bit. Well yeah, Tucson talked about how he inspired people to fight with him. How he led them through the armies of evil to protect everyone in Konoha. The sage shook his head to negate the child's words. That is not the whole reason, merely half of it. A cage, as you would call it, must be very powerful. Every cage is powerful in their own right, but even most cages cannot stand against an army along with another foreign cage. They would be overwhelmed given enough time. Your father is the exception to this fact. My eyes have seen what he has done in his short life. His existence alone is a deterrent for war. The holder of the title Army Killer belongs solely to your father Namikaze Naruto. He tapped the mirror again, causing the mirror's image to shift again. This Namikaze Naruto is another achievement made by your father. The very battle that gave birth to the title Kiroi Senku. This is the battle for Kanabi Bridge in the Third Great Shinobi War. Here your father brutally butchered thousands of men and women, leaving their families without mothers and fathers, leaving so many children without parents. This, child, is one of the horrors that could have been avoided had the world been different. With that the image began to play, and what had been shown would forever scar Naruto to the very depths of his soul. Break. Slam. A door being slammed shut echoed through the entire house as Minato was led through the house by his angry wife. In all honesty, he had never seen her this angry. There were times where his perverted teacher was caught peeping on her, by her, and she beat him senseless. She had been so angry that her hair had started swaying around that reminded everyone of the Kyuubi's 9 tails flailing about angrily. She had been so angry that she literally have heart attacks to untrained civilians with the level of her killing intent on accident. But all those times he had seen her angry pale in comparison to what he witnessed now. The moment Naruto had left the garden, Kushina had been visibly restraining herself from tearing Minato apart limb by limb and holding her killing intent so she didn't accidentally kill her daughter and the children present, so she did the only thing she could do at the time. Asked everyone as kindly as a pissed-off mother could be to leave and for Kana to go to bed a bit early. Not a moment had her request been made that the room was cleared. Even Kana, usually one to argue against going to bed, could tell now just wasn't the time and had promptly vacated the garden, leaving Minato alone to face his wife's fury. When the two finally reached Minato's study, Kushina promptly slammed the door shut, locked it, and to gently forced a passive amount of power into a seal on the door. A moment later and the walls of the room flashed blue before returning to normal. The moment that happened, Minato was sent crashing into a bookshelf from a right hook to the jaw. This was no coordinated attack pattern, no practiced taijutsu forms or katas. This was simply an old-fashioned beatdown. Not a moment after he crashed into the bookshelf was Kushina on him again, this time with a hard jab in the gut, knocking the air from his lungs. Next thing he knew, he was on his knees with Kushina standing in front of him, staring at him coldly. The aura she held now was unlike anything he had ever felt from her. Kushina's fiery temper had always been the thing that people recognized her for. Uncontrollable, fiery, loud and brash, these were the words used to describe Kushina when she was angry. But the anger he could see in her eyes right now, as his gaze met hers, was enough to let him know that he wasn't getting out of this unscathed. That cold fury she seemed to radiate, like saying someone is so angry that they're calm. As confusing as it sounds, it's the only way to describe what he was seeing. You better have a damn good reason why you just lied to our son's face like that. I didn't agree to this, you filled my mouth with lies, Minato. You do not go behind my back and make decisions about my kids without me. You may have donated the sperm, Minato Namikaze, but it was me that developed them for 11.5 months, carried them for 11.5 months, and it was me who gave birth to them. It's my 3/4 the work to your one, Minato. Start talking before I castrate you. Minato, finally able to breathe, spoke in a shaken voice, belaying just how much Kushina's punches still hurt even after close to 7 years of inactivity. Kakashi gave me his theories on Naruto's earlier abduction. He thinks that whoever put him under that genjutsu could have been targeting Naruto for longer than either of us know. Meaning that not only is he at risk at being brainwashed to leave Konoha for Kami knows where, but with our blood in Naruto's veins he could take whatever jutsu from the vault he wanted and be gone before we knew what was happening if what I feel happens comes to pass. He took in another shaky breath. Kami, her punch really felt like it knocked something loose. We can't let that happen, Kushina. If Naruto is brainwashed, then if he were trained by us it would only set us up for total takeover in the future. At least with this you got what you wanted with the least amount of risk. Kana hasn't been targeted, so she should be able to be safely trained without the threat of being turned against us in the future. Kushina was quiet during the entire explanation. Her face blank but her eyes projecting how little Minato's explanation comforted her. If anything, she looked angrier. What you did, Minato, was the same as abandoning your son if Kakashi's theories are true. You've just said you have decided to throw your own son away for the future of the village. What about Naruto, Minato? If he really is being targeted, he should be trained to where he can resist brainwashing and any attempts at kidnapping. Minato, finally being able to breathe easily, huffed. Kushina, I love Naruto, I really do, but I'm the Hokage. I have an entire village to look after. I have to consider every possibility in situations like this. I have to think about the what ifs. What if Naruto isn't strong enough to resist in the end and leaves even with the training we give him? What then? Kushina looked at Minato with disbelief. That's a load of shit and you know it, Minato. What about Anko? She's always under Orochimaru's influence with that damned cursed seal. Will you throw her away if she shows signs of giving into it? She was shocked again when Minato responded without missing a beat. Yes, but I have faith she won't. She had been receiving training in to resist temptation since before she had received the seal. She is different than Naruto simply because she has had that curse mark for close to 8 years and hasn't used it once. Naruto doesn't have the training, and he's already been influenced by the genjutsu. We don't know what genjutsu was used, so we don't know the effects it had on his mind, and sending a Yamanaka to check is too dangerous with his status as a Jinchuriki. You remember what happened with Yama when he was assigned to check on your mental stability after the war. Sending a Yamanaka would be the same asking a green as grass genin to fight a battle-hardened cage. Kushina flinched at the reminder of Yama. Minato, you're sleeping on the couch for the rest of the month. And this? Kushina walked up to Minato and did 2 things. The first was another painful punch to the gut, and the next was Kushina grabbing his shoulders when he was bent over and knees him in the crotch. Minato's eyes widened with pain at the assault but couldn't do anything as Kushina at him crumbled to the floor. He squeaked in pain while curling up into a ball on the floor. Kushina glared down at Minato before stalking back to the study's door, and before she walked out she turned to address Minato once more. I won't let you throw Naruto to the wolves, Minato. You may have given up on him, but I haven't. I won't let my baby be taken from me without putting up a fight. With that, Kushina flipped her hair over her shoulder and left the room, slamming the door in the process, leaving Minato to his punishment. Break. I didn't do the Battle of Canopy Bridge because I really don't know what took place there other than the fact Minato slaughtered Tsuchinon by the dozens. I have no knowledge over the specifics of this battle and can't think of anything good to make it so I am forced to skip it until I can find info on it. Please note that this specific section will be updated later on. When the images on the mirror rippled and turned transparent once again, the clearly shaken visage of Naruto was the first thing the elderly sage saw. Naruto's pupils were shrunken from fright, and even up to his neck in quicksand you could see Naruto shake. He was also noticeably pale. The sage sighed. He really didn't like showing these things to a child, but as far as he could see there was no other way. Naruto, he intoned, trying to get the child's attention. But the lack of focus in the boy's eyes showed he wasn't heard. Naruto, He tried again, his voice raising slightly. It did the trick because Naruto's once unfocused gaze zeroed in onto his own. Why did you show me that? He shouted, his voice shaking with a mix of terror, revulsion, and confusion. The sage closed his eyes. I needed to show you what your father was capable of. You saw firsthand why he is the only shinobi in this day and age that holds a flea on side order in what you would call a bingo book. Now you know, your father is capable of destroying armies in mere minutes. Now tell me, why would he need you and your sister as a way to prevent war when the entire continent fears him for what he can do? Naruto's eyes looked left and right for a way to avoid the question, but when he accidentally looked in the sage's eyes he couldn't tear his gaze away. Your father does not have the will to deny Konoha what it wants. He knew that Konoha wanted you and your sister, not as shinobi, but as weapons. He could have mentioned himself as a deterrent, but he didn't. Do you know why, young Jinchuriki? Naruto stayed silent, but his eyes beginning to water was enough for the sage to know he was getting through to the younger boy. He just needed to push a bit further. This world is ruled by one thing, child. Priorities. A priority is how much someone feels someone or something is important. As much as it pains me to say this, especially to a child, it must be said. Minato Namikaze holds the well-being of Konoha over his own family. He was asked to make his children weapons and he could not deny it. He would not go against what he felt is more important. Naruto couldn't refute the old sage's claim. The term, "the proof is in the pudding," came to mind. Every time Naruto came up with an argument to the sage's claims on his father, the sage had a counter-argument ready to be used. Finally Naruto's head fell while his eyes closed as wet tears of sadness ran down his cheeks. He didn't even realize that the ground he was once stuck in had pushed him back out. So now he stood in front of the sage crying his heart out. Why are you doing this? Why tell me Tucson doesn't care about me? Why are you hurting me? He finally cried out with sorrow and anger. The sage watched the boy let out his sorrow intently. He had finally broken through the wall of ignorance all children build from the day they're born. Now he just needed to make sure the pieces of what was left weren't put together improperly. To explain why I have done what I have, I must first tell you of who I am. My name while I was still a denizen of the world was Hagoromo Otsutsuki, but the people of today refer to me as the Sage of the Six Paths. The first wielder of chakra and the founder of Ninshu. When the sage finished speaking he looked into the sorrowful blue eyes of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. The beginning and middle of my story is unimportant to your situation. But to understand why I have done these hurtful things to you, you must understand the end of my story. You have listened and learnt the truth of your father for this long. Will you listen to me again before you curse me for everything I have done to you? Naruto wanted so much to deny the old man, to shout at him and curse him for hurting him. But something in the old man's gaze made him pause. He didn't know what it was. Perhaps it was the tired look in the elder's eyes. Maybe it was the almost unnoticeable tone of begging in his voice. But whatever it was, it made him nod his head in agreeing to listen. The first time since he met the elder, he saw him smile, as small as it was. A mere twitch of the lips in fact, but it was still there. Thank you, young one, he intoned with gratefulness. It all started with myself, laying on my deathbed, and my sons Indra and Asura. THSTA all for now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.